So, the community media and the number of awesome people with whom I talking to about community management experience is growing, and I'm extremely happy about that. And today with me, Denis Paulenka, who is a community manager in an interesting and somehow mysterious domain, which is Web3. Yes. And I'm happy to have you here, Denis.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm hoping that my knowledge and insights are gonna help anyone watching the podcast or being anywhere doing anything, maybe looking to get into community management or just hoping to see what the job is all about. I'm hoping I can help as much as I can.
I'm sure you do, because I saw too many vacancies for community managers in Ukraine. I found a lot of related to crypto or Web3 vacancies. So I think your insights would be helpful for the audience in Ukraine and also outside of Ukraine. So maybe you can tell a bit about your role, about yourself.
Of course. I think it's best to start from, I guess, the beginning. And I'm not talking about beginning when I was barely walking. I'm talking about like early college and where I started professionally working. Because I might have a unique approach to community management because Web3 community management is all I know. So there's probably things that are considered normal in community management that I do not do, and things that are considered not normal that I do on the daily because it's such a different industry. We might be doing completely different jobs while keeping the same title. I think it's best to start from my early college days. Around back in 2019, 2020, I started going to an IT college in north of Croatia, which focuses on organization and informatics. I already had a technical high school, where I was focused in computer science and similar things. So already in my first year, I met a couple of great people. Some of them were already involved in Web3. I started educating myself more, and then COVID hit in 2020 around March. And that was really when we all went home and had nothing to do. And this was also during the time where crypto started being more and more popular because people were back home and they had nothing to do. So it was one of those things that people are more and more getting into. And in the next 6 months, I actually got myself a role as a technical support for a company that primarily works with Ethereum and Ethereum chains. My role was basically, to reply to messages, solve issues, help write blog articles and support articles, and also do some QA or some testing of applications and how things work. Now, the initial first interview I remember was horrible. Not horrible in a way that like it was a bad experience, but I was absolutely clueless. So my manager at the time, he asked me some basic questions, something that someone in the industry should know if you wake them up in the middle of the night. And I was like, well, this and that and this and that, and it wasn't working. So he said, like, listen, I see your English is very good, which is very important for this role. And I see that you have a way of talking that sounds good, but you lack a lot of knowledge. So he gave me like this little guideline of like, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 questions that I should learn for next week. And if I do well on the next interview, then we'll probably move on and, see how it starts. And I remember I was studying day and night because it was a completely new industry for me. Even though I was already in IT and, learning stuff, going into a more specific industry is always going to be difficult. I studied day and night, basically spent like hours and hours on my free time studying for that. And next week, I would say it wasn't great, but it was definitely a big improvement over what I previously did. So he said, like, great job. I think if you can learn this in 1 week, I can't wait to see what you're going to learn in the next couple of months. So that's how I got the role. It was barely paying enough. This is my first actual professional career job that I had. I used to work other jobs, but they weren't in the industry or IT in general. So this was the first big thing. So, and over the next 6 to 8 months, I think I worked support, and they saw that I have a lot of talent for just talking to people, making them feel heard, doing support articles, knowing ahead of time what's going to be necessary to do your job properly. So eventually, I started automating messages and doing some things because a lot of issues in support are always going to be similar. They're always going to be 70% is going to be one or two problems that you already know are going to be asked. So I automated those, and then we basically shorten our response time to like a minute or 2 minutes per shift. And
Nice.
once they saw how well that works, they said like, oh, why don't you try community management? And I had no idea what it was. So I was like Googling what is community management, and then I saw what it was and like, okay, this is interesting. Why not? It already aligns with what I do and what I know best. So I took the role. Web3 does a couple of things that are like a primary thing for community managers. And the social media channels are usually consisting of Discord and Telegram. Those are like the primary hubs. It's going to be either one or the other, or sometimes together. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. But in Web3, community, I think, might be even more important in traditional marketing and similar things, because users and token holders, especially if the project or a company has a token, which can be maybe compared to a stock in the real world, they have a much more influence. So they always are more important, and they're part of the core team in a way, because what they say and how they feel is going to influence the way the company is going to move forward. Because if you don't have a good community, it's hard to rise and grow unless you're focused on businesses. But if you're looking at customers, you need to have a big community. So this is where I stepped in, primarily Discord, and doing a lot of different things, doing some discussions. I was also doing social media at the time a little bit, helping out on Twitter. Twitter is especially important for Web3. So I guess the main three social media channels would be Twitter, Discord, and Telegram. And there was also some unique things in Web3 that are perhaps not seen in normal community management, which is working with DAOs, or these autonomous organizations, which function as I wouldn't call them like I don't know how I would describe them simply, but let's say these are people who hold a certain amount of tokens. So they're technically owning part of the company. That DAO is like an independent part of a company, and they have a treasury that they can use to do things depending on what the holders vote on. So let's say it's sort of a democracy for what the money is going to be spent on. So I was working a lot with those. This includes like writing actual proposals, giving them a structure and then defining goals and seeing how much the funds will be used. So doing that, this is usually unique for Web3. I don't think this is done anywhere else, especially not a community manager. This is more in a finance sector. But, in Web3, there is a little legal leeway between things. So you have a little more freedom to do what you want, and you get to explore other parts of things you wouldn't usually do. And then eventually we started a sister company, which was much more B2B oriented. So this was much more talking to businesses. And this is where I saw the big difference between like working with customers and working with businesses. Because working with customers, you have to use a lot more, I would say, soft skills, especially communication skills, or you have to have a certain degree of emotional intelligence, because these aren't people that are communicating with you on company time and getting paid for it. These are people who are spending their free time being invested in your company, in your product, in your service, or whatever it is. So it's always going to be more personal for them. So you have to be able to talk with these people in a more human way, especially if they're unhappy, if they're unsatisfied, if they're criticizing the product, or they're angry, or they feel abandoned. There's a lot of different feelings in customers. So you have to be able to figure it out, what's the best way to approach this. For businesses, it's straightforward. There's really no room for emotion. You suggest this, they suggest this back, you sign an agreement, you're good. So it's much more simpler. And B2B was generally handled by another function at the company. So the so-called developer relations people, they are more focused on the business part on that company, while I was still focused on the community side and building, just customers and users, making sure they feel heard, and doing content and doing, quizzes and AMAs and community calls every now and then, and making content, making blogs, a lot of these different things. So community management, like I'm sure is I would say it's a job that goes a lot between different roles. You communicate both with dev teams, you communicate with marketing, you communicate with product. There's a lot of different domains you cover, so you have to be kind of in the know of everything, because you cannot say things that are not ready to be said. You have to be in the middle of everything, and you have a lot of responsibility to have every answer at the tip of your tongue, basically, for customers and for other users, and also for the team, because you're there in the middle of it. So you know how the community feels, and you know how to give this feedback from the community back to the team. So you're kind of like this mediator or facilitator between the team and the community. So your role is very important, especially in Web3, where it's more pronounced than I don't think anywhere else.
And you talked about the team, and it's interesting that I'm talking with various community managers from different countries and in different domains. Some of them pass from one team to another. They are part of a tech team, or they are part of marketing team, or they are part of customer support team. And you mentioned that you are a mediator from between team and community. And maybe you can tell more about the team. You were part of what teams and to whom you sort of report, or maybe you have had some stakeholders, maybe about that.
Right. So primarily, I think community management falls into the marketing category because marketing, this is just my opinion, and this is how I saw the structures through the multiple companies I worked for. But usually you have a head of marketing who then has under them a social media manager who handles the externals. So primarily Twitter in Web3, but there's other social media platforms too. And you have a growth manager or a growth lead who focuses on bringing in the numbers. He's working on some funnels, sales funnels, things like that, more advanced maybe. And you have a community manager who, in my opinion, is more there for internal parts of the marketing campaigns. To explain further, the social media manager is how the team will be seen outside of their user base, let's say. But the community management is how the users will feel engaged once they're part of the community. So my job would mostly be considered like user retention and keeping users happy because, okay, once you've done the initial job of bringing these people here, they need a reason to stay. So this is where I think community management shines the most, where you have to figure out how your community feels and how you can fuel them to stay there while you have social media managers maybe, and generally marketing might focus more on bringing people in while your job is to keep them from getting out. So like usually it's a marketing role. So you have a head of marketing, which is then divided into a community manager and then divided into a social media manager and a growth manager and maybe a DevRel, but he's more focused, I think, on the technical side. So I wouldn't consider it part of marketing. And then under that one, under me, usually you have moderators or community ambassadors. There's also tech support, but I would consider them part of the tech team or the developer team because they are more going to be focused on resolving issues and doing tickets and doing stuff like that. But they're also sometimes definitely part of marketing because they need to understand what's going on. If we have a certain event or we have a certain, I don't know the exact word, I'm missing the word, but generally an event of some kind. Exactly, yeah, we can say activities. They need to understand what kind of activity it is and how they should communicate with people because perhaps that activity is gonna have certain things like using their app or using the web app or doing something that might involve potential issues that technical support needs to resolve. So they need to be informed by the marketing team as well.
Yeah, and as a part of community, which was the corporate community inside the company, it's usually also involves HR marketing. So this community influences the way company looks like also outside. You need to attract people to join the company and they see the nice community and they also retain. And what is interesting, and I want you to maybe elaborate on it more, you talked about your team. So you mentioned the people whom you are reporting or the team who should be aware of everything that's happening within the community. You mentioned moderators. Maybe you can tell more about this role within the community and you as a manager of moderators, what they are doing. So I think it's cool to know.
So from my experience in a couple of different companies I worked, and including this one I'm currently employed at, so we have also a structure I can briefly share on that. Generally, it goes something like this. You have a head of marketing, which dwindles down into a community manager, and then he takes care of the moderators. Obviously, the head of marketing is still in charge of the moderators, but they delegate some of their responsibility down to me, and I'm going to be responsible for moderators. This sometimes, but not necessarily always, comes down also to doing some interviews for them as well. Because as a manager, it's kind of considered that you are already a very efficient and very good moderator. Well, from a moderator to a community management would be sort of a promotion that goes naturally. So me as a community management, I should be able to understand all the needs and the responsibilities of moderators. So it will also come natural for me to be able to pick my own team of moderators who I know are going to be able to do the tasks. Usually moderators are very good entry-level jobs, especially to Web3. So my job would be definitely to find these people after they go through the whole automation process and then cherry pick the best ones, I think. So let's say 10 to 15 people I would interview and then pick my favorites and see how they develop. I wouldn't ask them difficult questions. I would go back and ask them questions I was asked when I entered the industry. So like, show me that you know about this industry just a little bit. And if you don't know, let me see the potential you have. So I guess I have primarily the responsibility of doing the interview and training them. And I'm also responsible for how they act once they're finally at the company. So I need to be sure they're all following the guidelines and doing everything how it should be.
It's interesting that you mentioned that your responsibilities are like to organize some activities, and you mentioned several times AMAs and also quizzes and also big and scary Discord and stuff. What about the design? I'm always asking community managers whether they have this opportunity and responsibilities and chance to design the formats and activities and actually pick them for the community. Are you, or maybe within this domain in which you are working, it's more typical that we have this and that, and there's no much space for designing something new or something innovative. So are you designing something, or maybe you are more like, I don't know, implementing that is already designed?
So it's a good question because I think there is absolutely room for creativity. It's definitely something that you need to discuss with the rest of the team. Especially if it involves a certain budget or if it involves involving other members of the team. So you need to figure out if they're available. You need to figure out if the budget is, within boundaries. You need to figure out if the rest of the team likes the idea. But generally, for the basic, you do have this like boilerplate things that you do, which definitely includes if you are a company that involves a community, you definitely need to do community calls and sometimes Twitter spaces and then talk to other industry experts. That's optional, but it's very much welcome because it, builds the community and makes other people see who you are. And so like there is some definitely things that should be happening no matter if you have creative plans or not, which are consisted of community calls, maybe some AMAs, and sometimes just focusing on community retention, like discussions and things, which should happen naturally. And obviously, I wouldn't consider that activity, but like support in general, if tech support isn't there on social media active or something, you need to be able to jump in as well. So that's also part of your responsibility. But for creative ideas, I think Web3 allows a lot of creativity because there's a lot of platforms that focus on the so-called gamification because people usually love, seeing some kind of reward for their effort, even if it's fictional XP or some fictional badge or a fictional role in the Discord.
Badges are the best.
Yeah, exactly. People just love having some sort of proof they were part of this community. So there is a lot of room for creativity. I don't think I actually mentioned this. You have to understand what your community is. So you're not gonna, for example, this previous company. So it was developer focused and it was a lot of developers and it was like down to earth. They're figuring out things. They want to use the app. They want to use the SDK. They want to figure how things work. You're not going to do meme quizzes with them. You're not going to do, I don't know, these like off topic sessions. So you need to figure out what your community is. Is it like beginners to the space? Is it like already more experienced people? Is it people who trade on their free time? Is it people who are developers in their free time? Is it people who are business owners? Is it a community of community managers that there's a lot of these also in the industry. So you got to figure out who these people are and how much they already know about the industry. And you need to see how proactive they are, how much they want to, join these activities. So there's a lot of room for creativity, I think.
Yeah. So we talked about briefly about skills, and I think that maybe you can tell in like if we apply it to your domain and Web3 and this field, what, to your opinion, should this community manager, who's also responsible for the team of moderators and collaborate with various teams and aware of everything that is happening around, what skills should this person possess?
I think in general, if you want to be a community manager, you need to look into your personality in general. because a community manager needs to be a cheerful, extroverted person who is happy to communicate with other people in real life and in online spaces. And he wants to be on the stage. He wants to talk. He's very good with words. He has a way of simplifying content into more simple terms. So he needs to be a person who is very communicative. And of course, this is not saying that you can't be a community manager without very good communication skills, but it's definitely going to make your job much more difficult, because if you do not naturally have this talent for communication, you are going to spend some extra time figuring out what's the best way to approach things. While if you're more charismatic, naturally, you're just gonna to be able to do his job the best. Communication skills and team leadership skills are primary ones, but also eagerness, I think, because you need to want to do this job. You need to want to engage as much as possible. You need to be as talkative as possible. You need to try to be creative as possible. So if you're hungry and you have room for development and you're already very charismatic, you're basically on an upward trend where in a couple of years' time, you might be able to switch into a more senior role, into a better role, into a bigger role. But you can also stay there as a community management, but you're a very skilled one and you're going to need much less time than usual to solve some things and to do campaigns and to do other things. So yeah, primarily eagerness, team leadership, and communication, I think, are key for this role.
Yeah, we asked the community managers, we made a research within Ukraine, and we wanted to make like to cut of what is going on in Ukraine in terms of community management, and we asked and we got replies from 163 people, and they were like, we gave them the list so they could pick from the list like bullet points, and they mentioned communication skills are on the top, but then they had this field, what else, and they mentioned you should love people. And this is not something that you maybe put in the list of responsibilities or skills, but it's something that people also mention, and I think this is a true thing, because to have this internal force to repeat again and again something that you talked about a lot of times, and to be patient, that's a skill of a community manager for sure. And while creating those events and MA sessions, maybe some activities, and while talking to people and giving them the opportunity to do within your community what they came there for, like to grow their funds and stuff, you are inspiring a lot of people, and you are doing a lot, because as you mentioned, you need to be the person who is charismatic and open and talkative, and people are inspired by you and by me and by other community managers because we are awesome. But who inspire you? Because Dennis, you are doing all that, but you need to get somewhere the inspiration. Where is your source?
Right. That's an interesting one, because generally, so community management was never something that I thought about. So going through my early college years, I was still thinking, okay, I'm gonna end up as someone in IT, and I'm gonna be primarily a programmer or developer. I just realized since high school, I was just very happy to talk to people, and I was very happy to engage with people, and sometimes even organize events, finding out what my personality is. You know, I never really had any idols who I followed, or I never read any books or things like that. I just learned as I go along, which is either talk to other community manager or see examples from better servers with bigger communities, and just following their Twitters and things, and see how they feel and how the community feels, and see where things can go wrong, and reading about the falls of certain companies, or them losing communities or things happening. You just generally learn as you go. But like, my primary inspiration for this role is you're actually working, and this is your job. So when you consider that 70-80% of people are not really happy with their jobs, and they consider their jobs draining, no matter how much you do, there's no result, like pointless, like when you're working a job that no matter how much effort you give into it, there's no changes and there's nothing happening. Now in this current role, I'm definitely going to have the most responsibility I had so far, and because I'm going to have a big team around me, so I'm not going to be needing to wear absolutely all the hats in the community aspect. I already have moderators. We already have a good team. We already have things going. I'm walking into a working product and my job is to improve it. And generally, when you consider that you're getting paid for doing something that you consider natural to you, it's already an inspiration. You're working a job that you don't dislike. In the modern world, it's very hard to find a job like that. You actually network with a lot of people, you meet new people, you get to travel. I'm definitely going to be attending a couple conferences in the future now with the company.
Nice.
This is something that I'm very excited about. So doing this is just something that I wanted to do without realizing I wanted to do it. So I'm gonna try to give my best for it.
I think this is amazing, and I'm extremely glad, Dennis, that you shared your experience and your the way you see that, and you also gave some tips and tricks in Web3 and
Right.
this community management. And I thank you for that, and thank you for joining this project.
Of course, not a problem. I didn't even realize almost an hour went by. It was really fun.